March 14, 1943. Rabaul, New Britain. The veteran fighter pilot from Nagoya felt a surge of satisfaction when he spotted the American bomber through the shimmering canopy of his Zero. Another A-20 Havoc crawling along at 8,000 feet. To him, it looked less like an aircraft and more like livestock awaiting slaughter. He'd brought down 2 Havocs just the month before. Easy prey. The Americans called them attack bombers. Lieutenant Haruto Yamamoto thought of them as nothing more than flying gun targets. With a quick dip of his wings to alert his wingman, he shoved the control stick forward and plunged from 12,000 feet, the fierce morning sun positioned perfectly at his back. The Havoc below continued on its path, oblivious. They almost never saw him coming before it was too late. Inside the glass nose of the A-20, Sergeant Jim Baker, a Texan who could read danger like a rancher reads storm clouds, tensed without knowing why. He'd experienced the same eerie sensation over Buna 2 weeks before, a feeling like icy fingers running the length of his spine. His grandmother back in Houston had always said he inherited the sight. In Texas, that meant predicting hurricanes and tornadoes. Here, it meant sensing death when it dove out of the sky at 400 miles an hour. He searched the glare-blasted heavens with squinted eyes. Nothing. The instinct only got stronger. Then he finally saw them. 2 specks dropping out of the solar glare, swelling larger by the heartbeat. Zeros. His mouth went dry, and his pulse roared in his ears. He grabbed the intercom button. "Bandits! 2 o'clock high! Closing fast!" The aircraft commander, Captain Steve Morrison of Ohio, didn't waste breath on questions. The throttle slammed forward, nose down. Speed was their only chance. The Havoc wasn't designed to duel fighters. It was built to carry 4,000 pounds of bombs and pray it made it home afterward. First, they had to live long enough to drop them. Yamamoto watched the bomber break into a dive and nodded. They always tried to run. It only prolonged things. He steadied the gun sight, waiting for the perfect killing distance. 400 yards. His twin 20mm cannons would cut through the bomber's thin aluminum hide like hot knives through rice paper. He'd seen it countless times, the skin peeling open, flames erupting from the engines, figures leaping to their deaths. At 300 yards, he squeezed the trigger. Silence. Both cannons jammed. Fury flashed across his face. He switched to the lighter 7.7mm guns, but he had already overtaken his prey, his Zero streaking past the diving American. And then something happened that would echo across Rabaul's ready rooms. The nose of the A-20 erupted in fire and thunder. 8.5 caliber machine guns unleashed a solid beam of destruction, joined instantly by the twin .5 cals in the dorsal turret. 10 heavy guns, 800 rounds per minute each. The numbers were beyond comprehension. The effect was simple. More than 2,000 rounds ripped into the space Yamamoto had occupied an instant ago. His wingman wasn't so lucky. Lieutenant Tanaka from Osaka flew directly into the maelstrom. The Zero didn't explode. It disintegrated. The engine vanished in a white flash. The fuel ignited. Wings separated from the fuselage as if sliced off by a giant blade. What remained of the fighter turned into a storm of metal and flame, tumbling toward the Solomon Sea. Tanaka never had time to cry out. One heartbeat, he was a pilot. The next, he was a cloud of incandescent debris falling through open sky. Baker didn't release the trigger, even as the explosion faded. The 8 guns shuddered the entire forward fuselage, blasting brass cartridges across the compartment like burning hailstones. The fire rate was so violent the vibration blurred his vision. Still he rode the glowing tracers upward, walking them toward Yamamoto's Zero as it clawed desperately for altitude. The rounds found the tail. .5 caliber slugs tunneled clean through the control surfaces, each hole big enough to fit a baseball through.
Japanese fighters were built for agility, not punishment. No armor, no self-sealing fuel tanks, every gram trimmed for speed. That saved weight in a dogfight. It was lethal when American heavy guns locked on. Morrison fought the controls as he hauled the A-20 out of the dive at 3,000 feet. The airframe wailed under the 4G strain. Things rattled in places they shouldn't rattle. They had fired more than 2,000 rounds in less than 60 seconds. Almost nothing was left. But they were alive. Through the side window, Morrison caught a glimpse of Yamamoto Zero staggering downward in wide spirals, trailing smoke. The Japanese pilot was wrestling with a ship that would no longer obey him. No rudder, no elevator authority, nothing but a smoking engine and gravity. Yamamoto understood before his plane hit the water. Control surfaces gone meant fate was sealed. The Pacific raced upward. He thought of his wife in Nagoya, expecting their first child, and the bitter fact that he had imagined dying with honor, not losing to the defensive firepower of a bomber he once mocked. At 200 miles per hour, the Zero slammed into the sea like a stone hurled against concrete. Whether he died instantly or drowned seconds later, the result was the same. His war ended in silence rather than glory. Morrison turned the wounded A-20 toward base, coaxing the failing left engine to stay alive. Hydraulic fluid seeped away somewhere behind the cockpit. Baker checked the ammunition belts. Barely 300 rounds remained total. One more Zero today, and they would have been finished. But none came. And soon pilots at Rabaul would stop laughing at the havoc. Word had a way of spreading in ready rooms, especially when arrogance got people killed.
6 months later, and 3,000 miles away, the same truth was waiting to be learned again, this time in the skies of North Africa. September 3, 1943, Tunisia. Captain Heinrich Müller from Hamburg led 4 Bf-109s on a sweep south of Tunis, looking for American convoys, and secretly hoping to find P-40 Warhawks. 2 more kills and he would reach 30, earning the Knight's Cross. A promotion, a future. His sweetheart in Berlin promised she'd marry him once he pinned the medal on his chest. Then his wingman called out, 6 P-40s below. Müller felt a thrill. The 40 killers, they called them. Slow, clumsy, no match for the Messerschmitt. Lieutenant Tom Rodriguez of Los Angeles commanded the American formation. He knew every flaw of the Warhawk. It couldn't climb with a 109, couldn't turn inside one, but it had 2 strengths no German could ignore. It could dive like a thrown anvil, and 6.50 caliber guns could erase anything they hit. Rodriguez spotted the Germans first. 4 fighters diving on them from altitude. Good. Let them think the Americans were fleeing. He waggled his wings, signaling the plan, then eased the P-40 into a shallow climb. A perfect picture of prey trying to escape. The Germans bit instantly. Müller shoved his throttle to the firewall, screaming downward at nearly 400 miles per hour. His 20mm and twin 13mm guns had shredded Warhawks before. This would be no different. The Americans always broke and ran. But at 800 yards, the sky changed shape. Rodriguez suddenly flipped his P-40 upside down and yanked it into a brutal dive. His entire flight followed. The G-forces threatened to black out every man in the formation. The P-40s tore downward faster and faster, 400 miles per hour, 450, slamming into the red line at 500 miles per hour. No German pilot would attempt such a dive. The 109's airframe simply wasn't meant to. Müller tried to follow, but his wings began to flutter and his controls went mushy. He had to level out to avoid tearing the aircraft apart. The Americans kept diving, then used the tremendous speed to rocket straight back upward. The trap snapped shut. The P-40s shot through the German formation at a combined closing speed close to 800 miles an hour. All 6 opened fire at once. 36.50 caliber guns stitching the sky with a torrent of flame and lead. The 109s flew right through it, with no time to break away.
Mueller's wingman, Lieutenant Fritz Bauer of Munich, crossed the convergence of 3 firing Warhawks, 18.50 caliber guns focused on a single patch of air. His fighter detonated. Not broke, detonated. Engine block vaporized, wings folded. The cockpit disappeared in a thunderclap of metal and blood. Bauer died so abruptly his brain never registered danger.
Another German fighter lost its left wing in a single blast, column cut clean off by heavy slugs. The aircraft rolled into an impossible 12G spin, snapping the pilot's spine instantly before plowing into the desert in a plume of dust. A third Bf-109 was doused in flaming fuel when .50 caliber rounds punctured its tank. The pilot, a 20-year-old from Dresden named Erich Hoffmann, knew what happened only for 2 heartbeats before the cockpit ignited in a furnace of white heat. The P-40s didn't stop shooting until they were clear. Mueller alone punched through the storm of gunfire, his airplane drilled with 43 holes, but still whole. He did not attempt to turn back. He ran, and he kept running all the way to Tunis. Mechanics stared in disbelief at the battered 109. Mueller climbed out uninjured, but the man who stepped onto the tarmac was not the one who had taken off. The unshakable belief in German superiority had been ripped out of him in 10 violent seconds. He started drinking. A month later, he was reassigned to training duty. Everyone knew why. From that day on, the P-40 was no longer dismissed as obsolete. American pilots began calling them flying destroyers. German orders were updated. Engage only with altitude advantage and numerical superiority. Never follow a P-40 into a dive. Never assume an American fighter is running. The lesson would repeat itself across the Mediterranean and the Italian peninsula. In January 1944, over Anzio, a Focke-Wulf pilot named Wilhelm Krohn attacked a B-25 Mitchell bomber. Unaware it carried 14.50 caliber guns. In 4 seconds, the Mitchell poured 800 rounds into his aircraft. The engines ripped off, the wings folded, and Krohn's parachute shredded before it could deploy. He fell 6,000 feet with full awareness of every second. By early 1944, even Germany's pride, the Bf-109, was losing the sky. Newer variants gained armor, bigger cannons, and heavier engines, but each addition stole speed and climb rate. The aircraft that once ruled Europe became the flying brick. What had been a duelist weapon was now prey. April 14, 1944, Bavaria. Major Kurt Steinberg led the last full G6 squadron into combat. 24 took off to intercept American bombers. 6 returned. Steinberg watched 3 of his pilots vanish under the 8.50 calibers of a P-47 Thunderbolt. The Thunderbolt didn't just defeat a 109, it erased it. 1 second it existed, the next second it was confetti floating in sunlight. Steinberg survived only by diving away and fleeing. He began the war believing in honor in the sky. He ended it, hiding in clouds and praying radar wouldn't